I tried to do it, but it said I need permission from you.
Oh, no permissions.
See, that's why you have to do it.
Let's see if I can.
Shri with the haircut.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, are we all here? Miss anybody? Do you have any fans of The Office? The show The Office? I don't know whether you've seen the latest
Some good
SGN
news.
episode. Not gonna ruin it, but if you're a fan of The Office, you should watch it.
Wait, what? What did they just do?
SGN, some good news. You know, that's the John Krasinski YouTube show that he's put out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's to promote good. So he only covers like feel good stories for about 15 minutes. So, anyways, it's a pretty good show just in general. But if you're a fan of The Office this week, is a good week to watch it. Steve, have you seen it?
I know what happens, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, even if you know what happens, you saw it.
Yeah, I'm going to. I watch it every week. I just haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, it just came out, but this one's pretty good. Okay, right. Today, so we normally don't have group meetings over the summer, but I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to continue to see each other on a more frequent basis. Yes, we see each other on stand-ups, which is great, but this is just be another opportunity to do that. It doesn't have to last a full hour. I actually think most of these shouldn't. Just get us to reconnect. We can talk about some upkeeping items. If anybody wants to add something or just share a positive story, you can always definitely do that. So I just wanted to give us an opportunity to have these light ones. And as a default, what we've done before, and I know this is new for Alex and Shri, you should have seen on the Trello board that has been posted to general is a list of topics that people have. So anybody can post any sort of topics. You've seen the things that we've talked about before. Typically what we do is we go through them, record, we either draw a toast, we each present our own understanding of it, and we have a combined shared group understanding of what this might look like, or I just give a quick explanation, and it allows folks to have some ideas around some of the less evident parts about getting a PhD or what is research and things like that. So this is something, so what I'd like for folks to do, we're going to have Heng's going to lead us on is going to talk about something that he's going to be talking about. But in the meantime, I'd love for folks to go in there and you can upvote questions. So if you look at the questions category, you can look through them. To upvote them, you click on it, and then you can, when you click on the ticket, there is a button at the lower right that says vote. It's above the word archive and share. So you can upvote as many as you want, which is whatever the top one that we get is what we'll discuss during a meeting. So hopefully over the summer, we'll get through about a dozen of these and get through some of your biggest questions. Anybody can create a ticket. You can put them on there. So I would say, please scroll down and look at the bottom ones too. You can upvote as many as you want. So if you find something that's interesting, it could be you want my opinion on something, or you want us all to share that discussion. It's totally open. Okay.
Okay.
So
can someone share the
Alex.
link again? The link is not working for me, at least.
You have to sign in.
The board is not found.
Yeah, you have to sign in.
Beautiful. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So Heng, why don't you go ahead and so does anybody? So Heng has an admin topic he wants to bring up. Is there anybody else with stuff that anybody wants to discuss today?
We need a new stand-up theme, Czar.
Ooh, that's right. Okay. Who has done it so far? We had Yushu do that, right? Stevie has done it. Alex has done it. Tima has done it too, right? So I would like it to be somebody else. Who was the last one before Yushu? It was Alex, yeah?
No, I think I was the last one.
Okay,
I
Alex.
think.
So once you tab somebody that's remaining, and you got Shri, Jacob, Heng, and myself.
Jacob.
Choose one of them.
All right.
Jacob. Okay. All right. So, do you have one on the top of your head, or do you want us to come back to you by the end of the meeting?
We'll do the end of the meeting. Let me think of a
Okay.
good.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Thank you, Stevie, for that reminder. Are there other admin items too? Okay. All right. Hey, why don't you go ahead and jump in with what you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, so yeah, I would like to share the experience of our project with Dr. Foster, Alex. So during the last 2 weeks, since we have the study going on using 2 water patients, Cynthia and Bernie, and actually the study started at the end of last year, which I think is at the end of November, and everything went well there. So just recently, we received their emails from our collaborator, Dr. Foster, Dr. Garnicker. They received they received the emails from the participants, and the participants had problems to interact with the water patient, but actually we didn't like modify anything on our server side. So at first we thought that participants didn't follow up the interaction instruction, since they need to allow the permission on Chrome to use the speech input and allow the insecure content, since we use HTTP but not HTTPS on Chrome. So we thought that the participants didn't follow up the instructions, but we just had a Zoom meeting with the participants, and we showed them how to start the interaction. But even though they started the interaction, they also had a similar problem. So they can't continue the interaction after like several questions. So we started looking into the code, and finally we found that. And we also have the Desti to help us with that. But finally we found that this is called the Slack notification. Since we integrated the Slack notification, we want to get the status, get notified when there's users start the interaction, and when users ask some questions that can't be recognized by our system. So we use the Slack notification to let us know the current status. But there's some problem with the Slack notification on our server side, which prevent the virtual patient Bernie and Cynthia to respond to the participants. So, but we didn't thought about that. So we just to deactivate the Slack notification, and everything works well now. And also we got another problem, which is not which did not affect the currently study, but since our collaborator also need us to duplicate the virtual patient to prepare for our next project, but we also have the problem to duplicate the virtual patient. But finally, we also fix that problem. So what we would like to do, so I think maybe it's a good time that we can do the retrospective on the potential bugs on BPF2. And so in case that we will have some similar problem in the future, which I think this will affect our trust between us and our collaborator and also participants, since it's not easy to recruit, especially for the clinician participants, to interact with virtual patient. So I think we can do the retrospective, and I can share with you the bugs we have and how we fixed that. And we can also maybe identify some potential bugs in BPF2, and we can bring on some action items to fix that, in case that we could have some problem in the future. So my plan is I will send out a downloadable link after this meeting to get all of your availability. So maybe we can meet sometime this week based on everyone's availability. So we can discuss this in details. To retrospective, mainly is retrospective, and also bring up the action items to fix the potential bugs.
Yeah, thank you, Heng. I want to kind of highlight a couple of things. One, I think Alex and Heng did a really good job communicating with our collaborators. That's really, really important. So if you're running into bugs, which as computer science, we all get it. We're all the technical, we understand that bugs are going to happen. One of the most important things is to make sure you have an open and frequent communication with the collaborators. The worst thing is for them to not hear from us, right? So you don't want to say, well, if I haven't solved it, I shouldn't talk to anybody. So that's from an end user perspective, that's not what they want. So I think Heng and Alex did a good job constantly communicating what we were trying, what that we were aware of things and that we were working hard and addressing. So that's one thing. The other thing is to think about is we're not a software development house, and we're a research house. So we definitely know that we're not going to, how can we be successful in developing systems this even without a, we don't have the resources of a large company where we can, and we don't have the time for you all to do a bunch of the software best practices that we know. But what can we do given the realistic amount of time that everybody has to work to do development? So that's really what I hope to get out of the retrospective that Heng and Alex are going to lead, is to say what's realistic here. How can we have a successful system that or a process so that we can do good levels of documentation and really be realistic given the environment. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you all come up with in terms of being able to balance all those things. Okay, so I think everybody's got a lot of input in, you all have touched the code base or looked at it or used the system. I really would appreciate your insights because I think, again, Alex and Heng worked really hard. They luckily were able to get through this, but we want to improve based on this experience, right? Any questions or thoughts about it? All right, so does anybody please raise your hand if you want more time to upvote stuff on the Trello? Anybody need more time?
Just 1 second. I forgot to.
Again, I would strongly suggest especially look at the bottom, maybe start from the bottom and go up in case you want to upvote any of the ones at the bottom. I'm gonna, how about this? I'm gonna put 1 minute on the clock so that you have time to add more questions and or upvote as many questions as you want. Okay, I'll put 1 minute on so that folks feel like they have enough time to do this. All right, time is up. Does anybody need more time? I see Jacob's eyes are still moving.
Yeah. I'm good. I'm good.
All right, I'm gonna click refresh. And refreshing doesn't actually do anything. I actually have to manual sort. I see, all right, the top one is how do I build on a conference paper to turn it into a journal paper? Is that all right? Okay. So I think for this topic, it's a rather small topic, so we can go sort of discuss it rather quickly. Who's going to do any sort of recording? Who's going to try that?
This is already being recorded.
Oh, okay, it's already being recorded. Excellent. Okay.
Do we want to record just this part, or?
We can slice it if need be, right? That's fine. So for a lot of big picture, because I don't want to assume a lot of prior knowledge, but in computer science, our goal, when we think about publishing, we think about publishing original work. And the two main places that people typically publish are conferences and in journals. Conferences are usually every year. Journals are often a rolling submission, so you can submit to them at any time. In most fields, journals are very prestigious. They take a while to get into, but that's where it's considered archival knowledge, and conferences are more play a role for people to get together and meet and share ideas, less as a archived way to record the progress of a field. That's different for computer science. The thinking typically goes that computer science moves so rapidly that journals and their 1.5 to 2 year cycle to get into a journal is often way too slow to keep up with the changes in computer science, right? So if you think about where was machine learning 2 years ago till today, it's vastly different. Whereas cryptocurrency 2 years ago to today, whereas deep learning, deep fakes, for example, I mean, 2 years is a lifetime, right? So that's why in computer science, conferences have grown in stature so that conferences are very, very selective to get into. Oftentimes about 25% get into it. And that's the same level as journal acceptances, both in computer science and in other fields. So conferences and journals are typically worth about the same in computer science, right? So typically you can apply to one or the other. Now, the reality is if you become a professor, which I hope some of you really think about, and if you are, I'd love to continue the conversation, you might be in a college of engineering like I am. And a lot of the people that will be evaluating you might be in mechanical engineering or might be in aerospace. Now they might be in a field where journals are the only thing that they know how. They would just not even count conferences because conferences are just an opportunity for you to meet up with your friends. It's great for networking, but in terms of research productivity, they would not be counted, sometimes at all. So that causes a conundrum, right, for computer scientists. Well, in our field, journals and conferences are equivalent, but whenever you start getting yourself evaluated by other disciplines, they don't understand that. Even though you try to tell them, they go, yeah, but in our conferences, it's 90% acceptance rate, and you only have to submit half a page of text. Why would that count the same as a journal paper? It's hard for that. So in computer science, there tends to be what's called a 30% rule, which says if you publish a conference paper, there is often an opportunity for you to publish as a journal, convert it to a journal for adding about 30% more content to your work, right? So that because you can't submit the same thing twice, because that's, it's duplicate information. If you were to add to it enough where people who read it could get more out of the paper, that's usually about 30% more. You could say, well, I actually got something in addition to what I would have read just the conference paper. It's different enough that it should stand on its own. And that's typically what the bar is set for a journal paper. So if you got a conference paper and you want to make it a journal, that one way to do it is to do a 30% more. Some conferences go straight to journal, like IEEE VR, the journal track goes straight to TVCG, but that's because they have a special relationship, that they have a contract, a memorandum of understanding between the two that allows a one-to-one. And it's directly to help people on their CV be able to say journals for people who are not computer science journals, again, where people look at. And so it would be very difficult for somebody to have, let's say, 30 proceedings, 30 conferences and no journals and come up for tenure. People would be very confused when they need some conferences, okay? So again, in computer science, the way you get from a conference to a journal is you add 30%, okay? So for those of you who have conference papers, I mean, think about what does that 30% look like? So just take a second there. So those of you who have written a conference paper, well, what does that 30% look like? Does anybody want to share it? Anybody who's actually converted a conference to a journal want to share their experiences? Alex, have you ever done that with any of your work?
So there is one paper that we decided to convert to a journal. And basically what happened at that time is that we were planning to send to a conference, and that was when I had my surgery 2 weeks before. We were gearing up to finalize the paper, and we were going to send to conference. And then after that, I had my surgery. And in the meantime, we collected and added a study to that paper. Right, so at that time, the idea was, let's publish a conference paper and then do something else and then publish a journal paper. Now that we have done that, we have already, as I was recovering, as time passed, we added that study. We added about 15 more participants. We just decided that it would be better to send a journal paper instead of just the conference. But I think that 30% rule applies here. Basically had 2 studies and then we added a third one. What you have heard me do a lot with you is we are always talking about, okay, this is the conference paper. How do we make this into a journal paper? So try to write the conference paper already planning for a journal paper, right? So that's, at least I like to think that way. At least we have a bigger plan, and we know we are working on this small part of the conference paper now, but we have a bigger plan. So I think that's also a good strategy. If the conference doesn't work, you know you have what's the next step, and if the conference works, even better, because now you also have a plan to move forward.
Yep, that's a great strategy, Alex. So from practical components, what can you do? What does the 30% look like? You could run a follow-up study, right? So something that it adds, potentially you go explore a further question down that path that Alex is talking about. So, you know, you can imagine running, again, an additional study that's similar thematically, but delves into one element with more detail, so that when you're reading the journal paper, it said, I ran this first study, and here are the results, and then based on that, I followed up that to explore one niche component of it, and I found these additional findings. So that would be an example of something that can happen. Another example that some people do is they will take their initial study and report on one major finding in that study. But then there could be, I think most of you who have run studies know this, there's so often so much data and so many things you could look at, it's just hard to look at everything. You could add that 30% by expanding the scope of what it is that you examine. The whole idea that the contribution of looking at more data, more variables, or more components adds to the global understanding of what the paper provides, right? It's not just a rehash of the conference paper, but it's to be able for you to say, hey, we delved into a very important component, and then we were able to make some new additional adds to the field because we looked at these additional components. Okay, so that tends to be the two common ways that I typically see going from a conference to a journal, is doing an additional study that's similar thematically, right? And that can be very, very straightforward and a good way. The other one is to take the original study and explore more variables, but not just because any more variables, just because, but it has to make sense. If you are the reader, you should not be confused what additional stuff, what additional value you got from reading the additional 30%. It's not just, oh, they took up more space to discuss more useless variables. That doesn't happen. It should be 30% more value to the reader. Right? That should be a better way to look at it. So the reader goes, yeah, I got more value from reading this longer version of this idea.
I think for most studies, you should follow the conference journal route, or are there times where it would make more sense to target a journal first?
That's a great question. Should you go conference then journal, or is there ever time you would go to just journal? I think journals play a different role than conferences. As we started off at the beginning, journals are much more seen as the archival way to record progress. So things that would work great for a journal would be a survey paper. Survey papers don't tend to work very well for conferences. A lot of conferences, they don't really have a survey paper track or way to get that out. So a journal is really, really great. Another thing I also recommend people is at the end of your dissertation, combine all your work together and do a sort of a meta-analysis. And that could be great for a journal paper that way too. Because by that time you've thought about that, Stevie, you're in a great position now. Where you were for each individual study is different than where your head is today, right? You've seen this whole set of work in this big, much bigger arena. At least I hope so, since your defense is in a week, right? So now when you decide to write your journal, if you were to write a journal paper, it's got a more holistic, larger scope than any conference paper could really have. It doesn't fit well in a conference, right? So that could also be a nice way to put all your ideas together in a larger place. So that's a common thing to do. Is at the end of your dissertation, if you have, let's say, 3 conference papers, and let's say one of them has already been turned to a journal, and now you're going to write a journal paper about the whole thing, right? I believe Andrew Robb did this. That's a good example. So there's certain things that fit well in a more archival written format than the conference, which has a planned presentations component, right? So that's why, for example, survey paper would work well for a journal. So a survey paper, you shouldn't go to a conference. You should not. One thing I would also say to most people, don't think if you get a journal plus conference, then you get 2 items on the CV. Therefore, it must be twice as good. That would not be the right way to think about this thought, right? I love Alex's the way he put it. The conference and the journal is, you should think of them as a pathway along the way you're going. So just because you get more milestones in the middle doesn't mean that you've made necessarily more progress, or that people suddenly think you're more prolific. Okay. Last question on that part was from Mohan, was why are some called transactions? IEEE transactions and ACM transactions, those are typically the highest rated journals in a field. One thing you can look at, you can all be aware of, is to search for something called the impact factor. You can always Google that. Also, Science V. There's a journal ranking. Maybe SJR. There are journal rankings. Oops, dadgummit, sorry, here. This one's okay, but there are ways for you to check if you're trying to click on a journal. The other thing to do, the one that maybe I'm old school in this way, is I take a look at my colleagues, the ones that I look up to. Doug Bowman, Skip Rizzo, where are they publishing? Larry Hodges, and if they publish in a place, I use that as a good standard. One thing you do not want to do is fill your CV with fillers. That is something that I am very adamant about with my students. It's something that I think there's a lot of opportunities out there to publish at very low quality places, and the hope is that we're talking about 80, 90%, maybe 100% acceptance rate, that these titles can sound similar to a good place and people might not know. There are a lot of, unfortunately, shady places that will sell you, and they'll say, you pay us $2,000 and you can add it's published. Nobody will ever read it. Nobody will ever cite it. Nobody will ever know about it, but somehow your CV looks a little bit larger because of it. And they're selling it to you for about $2,000 a line item. That is, I think, has a lot of ethical reasons to not do that. So I would rather see, I've said this many times, I've been on many search committees, I would rather see a few good publications at good places that made an impact than a whole 2, 3, I've seen people apply for a faculty position out of grad school with 12 to 15 publications, and you're just laughing at them. It's like, that's not even possible. You're not doing it. You haven't done, that's not contribution. You're just you're trying to game the system. As a matter of fact, I don't believe you more. I actually think less of you, because why would you put together such garbage if that doesn't represent what you do? So don't try to game the system. That would be my recommendation.
Here's our publication. So you have to do your due diligence and understand what's happening.
Tima's got a question.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So is it a good way to interpret like that 30% more as additional like research question? If, for example, your main work has like, I don't know, like 2 research questions, if you add like 1 more, it's
yeah, that's a good way to think about it, right? Again, if that 3rd research question is valuable, just as valuable as the first 2, I guess that's the caveat, right? If the 3rd one is total garbage, then it doesn't add any value just because you have 3 versus 2. But if you said the 3rd one was just as valuable as the first 2, that's a great way to think about it, Tima, is to say, we looked at these 2 things, and the 3rd one might, you now have the space to delve into it, and it was valuable, right? That's
okay,
good.
and another question that I have is about like a language of conference and journal paper. So is it like any difference? Do you have to rewrite the other like 60% of the work that you already have?
Yeah, that's a great question. You should rewrite it, because it should feel different because you're talking about a larger thing, right? If you have 3 research questions, the contribution of the whole should have shifted. Right? Think about the momentum. If you think about physics, the momentum, the middle of where this thing is, if this is the conference, if you made something bigger, the momentum is shifted somewhere, right? So the whole thing that you are submitting is different. So conceptually, what you'll typically do is you'll rewrite the introduction, right? And then you might say, we ran 2 studies. Pretend, for example, you had 2 studies. So this first study, and you should even clearly spell it out. Sometimes like this first study was presented at a conference. Sometimes some journals require that so that people can already know that, hey, go look at this other paper if you want something. But it should look different, right? The title should be different. The introduction should be different because you're introducing something that's different. It's 3 research things. To your example, these 3 research questions should be different than just 2 plus 1, right? Because by understanding all these 3, I now have a deeper understanding in some way. And so it should explain the whole thing. Of course, your conclusion will look different too. However, you can, some conferences, they will allow, let's say, the study design. You don't have to rewrite the study design just to change the wording for study design, right? Study design is exactly the same. You can use that. You can just, but you need to make sure you tell that when you submit it to the journals, this is what I did. If you got concerns, they can let you know ahead of time. But you can say, look, this thing was published. The study design stayed the same, so I kept sections 4 and 5 exactly the same. I rewrote the intro. I added these other components, and then I went on. And so the new sections are 6 and 7 that were not in the conference paper, for example.
So
Kind of encountered.
if I can add something, that's something that might be, I don't know if it's controversial or not, but it happens in tangible user interfaces. There's a big group that cares more about design, and there's a big group that cares more about technology. And depending on where you submit, your related work will usually change a little, because there are some names that you want to cite on your related work that you increase your chances of being accepted, because some groups, depending on the conference on tangible user interfaces, they will find it not acceptable that you have not cited someone in the background that's more related to design, if that's the case, or more related to technology, if that's the case. So depending on the conference you're submitting, you also have to pay attention to your related work. Sometimes that makes sense, and that's what I'm saying. In tangible user interfaces, to me, it's very clear. I don't know how that is in virtual reality and virtual humans. I still don't have that.
Stevie?
Oh, to Tima's question, I was going to say about rewriting stuff. I kind of experienced that in my dissertation, because everyone who said that you can just copy and paste your conference papers into chapters is telling a story. Like, that's not true. You have to rework everything so that it fits together, and it's much more Frankensteinish than I anticipated. Because before the people were dead, they were people, but then he made a new person glued together of different parts of people. So the sections are the same. They're similar, but altogether they make a different person or a monster. So, well, in my defense, I am thinking about that because the National Theater is showing different plays that they've recorded. They just released Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller's Frankenstein, so I was thinking about that anyway. But regardless, you are Frankensteining some things into something else. Mm-hmm. So it does take on a different sort of appearance, even though the pieces are the same.
Okay.
Yeah, I think partially because your thinking is different, right? When you wrote that first paper for you, Stevie, is 2015. What you thought that you were writing about and what you thought you understood has changed over the years, right? And so, yeah, that the intro, when you look back and you start reading the intro and the text you wrote, many times I suspect a smile creeps across your face. You're like, whoa, I was way off. It might be surprising because you think you're writing some sort of global truth all the time. That's in theory, the practicality is your thinking has changed. You've changed. Because you've run more studies, you've looked at this much more, you've looked at it deeper. The world has changed, so it's okay to be able to say, yes, this is what I thought. This is how I now envision this as part of something bigger. So that Frankenstein hopefully is prettier than the original person. So it doesn't have to be this lumbering person.
If you remember in the book, he does make The Bride, and she's beautiful, but his first one, not so much. So just throwing that out there.
And just the last thing, and we're already at 40 minutes, so maybe we'll just address this question, and we'll continue with other ones next time. Impact factor, just to let you know how that's calculated, it's, at least I believe this is true. I don't know if it's not to be true, but it's the average number of citations for each paper that gets published in each location, right? So, for example, you see IEEE TVCG, the impact factor is 3.78. That means each paper in there should be cited about almost 4 times, which is quite good. I mean, you know, you have not too many duds in there, or you at least have, most papers seem to reach a lot of people. A lot of other people say, wow, that's valuable enough to have inspired me to put in, to cite it. So if you get a impact factor, I think as a good rule of thumb, anything greater than 1 should warrant your attention. If it's less than 1, that means some of those papers didn't get anybody to cite them. And if that's the case, why did they even accept in the first place? Was it that they're accepting too many? Was the standard so lax that it didn't matter? On and on. Okay, so the world of academia, the currency is the respect of your peers, right? If they said, wow, when they read your paper, that's why I've often said to you, think about the reader, think about what they're going to get from it, not a report of what you did, because you gain my respect whenever you've influenced my thinking, not because I read that you ran a study with 500 people. Like, okay, yeah, that's a lot of work, but why would I cite you? Is because I read your paper and I learned something, and it shaped my thinking in some way. So that's why people value that so much. Cool. And one question, that last thing I was going to say, some people would say, how do I know which researchers are strong? Right? I've said some names. If you're getting to the field, you're not sure how strong somebody is or how young or where they are in the field. One way, which is very controversial, is to look at Google Scholar. If you go to Google Scholar, you can type in people's names, and there's a number called the H-index in there. It's very, very controversial. But basically, the H-index is number of papers. You have H number of papers cited at least H times. Okay? So if you're just beginning your career, if you graduate and you've written 3 papers and they all got cited 3 times, your H-index is 3. Yay, that's good, right? So that a junior researcher, you'd expect something there. If by the time if you become a professor, you would expect something on the order, and people coming up for tenure get somewhere between 10 and 15. When you get up to full, you probably get somewhere about 25. So you've had 25 papers cited at least 25 times. So basically, it means the thinking is it's a sustained career of important work. But as you can imagine, there are a lot of other factors. If you're in a small field, there are just not as many people to cite your work as others. There are a lot of other things that can play into this. So, but you can put in some famous people in there and just see what Mel Slater, what his H-index looks like. Look at Fred Brooks, look at Henry Fuchs. You can put in different people's names, and you can start to see roughly where they are. You'd expect something in the double digits if people have been in the field for a long time, single digits if they're more junior and they're just getting established. But you can see how many papers they've been writing, and whether they maybe got on one paper that got very famous, but they haven't done anything else since then, or they really have a nice sustained set of work in an area. Okay? So that just helps you all go to Google Scholar. Google Scholar is known to have some messy data in there, but as a first blush, it would help you understand things. So if you wanted to look at that and help you give you context, that'd be a good way to do it. Cool? All right. Well, it's 4:40. I think we've done a good job with one question. So why don't we just leave it there? Hang is going to send out a doodle poll, as he said, to do a retrospective. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think writing meetings are going to continue moving forward. Mohan, did you want to have anything that you wanted to add?
No.
Okay, I saw your screen, yours got highlighted. Okay, so yes, I think over the summer we'll get back to again stand-ups. We'll get back to the writing meeting. Hopefully, we're going to talk. Maybe infrastructure comes back based on some of the conversations we had. But I want these ideas to be generated from you all, since I think then you'll, I think, be more driven to make them valuable. Than if I just said you must all have these set of meetings. Like, for example, I've heard so many good things about the writing meeting because I think it really came from you all, and you all get to shape that the way you need it, not me telling you to do it. So, all right. I hope
And the
it's good
theme.
to see everybody. Yes,
The-
Alex, did you?
Yes, from Jacob.
Oh, yes, the theme.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So the theme is going to be, you have to pick out something that you find satisfying. So like, whether it's like a specific pen that you use, or ripping the paper or like the plastic off of
Do
something.
not show popping a zit. That is one of the things that grosses me out. So I've got one of those phobias for that. So do not put that up there. I've got the phobia of dots. I don't know whether you know that that's a real thing, but I do have a phobia of that. All right, so satisfying, that's the thing, right? Something you find satisfying, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very cool. All right, thanks everybody.
All right, bye.